In a world of podcasts, one rises in the night to destroy them all. The elder god in an ocean of noise, the Cthulhu of the airwaves. This is Spoiler Country.
Alright guys, welcome back to the show. Of course, I am Kenric. You are at Spoiler Country. And today it's super cool because one of these guys has been on a few times for his amazing book, Canto. And if you're not into Canto yet, get into it because it looks fantastic and it's a great story. But today he brought on his other partner, Phil, Sevy, and we're going to talk The House, which is coming out with Dark Horse Comics. I want to say when? Is it September or October?
October 13th is the planned date.
Yeah, That makes sense. This thing was born. You guys met. I did a little bit of research. You guys met 2010.
Mm-hmm.
Got along like gangbusters. Decided to work together. Came up with this horror story, The House. I haven't had a chance to read The House yet, so I'm excited to check it out for the first time. So this will be all new territory for me.
Nice.
So that'll be cool.
Awesome.
Tell us, where was the idea born? How'd you guys really decide how you're going to do it?
That starts with Drew, actually. Go for it.
So yeah, when 2010, I graduated from Savannah College of Art and Design, and I graduated from the sequential department, and everybody was kind of raised in that department with you turn in sample pages, and that's how you get work at the big two. I graduated. I went to my first con. And I found out that the industry had done a complete 180, and that was not the case anymore. You got it.
Yeah.
So I ended up coming up with The House as with this rough. I had a rough idea of it, basically the spine that was about a paragraph long. So fast forward to October of 2010, and I meet Phil through Tom Lyle at New York Comic Con.
Mm-hmm.
And Phil literally got to Savannah as I was on my way out the door.
Oh, funny.
For the graduate program.
Yeah.
And I find out Phil's a writer. And so I send him the basic idea, and he just sends me back a 12-page breakdown that was born out of the paragraph.
Yeah.
And the idea was I wanted to tell a horror story that kind of fell into the realm of Alien.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily looking to reinvent the wheel, but it was just looking to do that thing really, really well. And so Phil took that idea and just kind of ran with it. And lo and behold, here's The House.
What is the basic concept of The House for anybody who's listening that might not know? Give me the elevator pitch.
Yeah, it's about a squadron of U.S. soldiers during the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. They are in the woods, and a whiteout blizzard hits them. So they kind of seek shelter, and they stumble across this abandoned manor house, this big mansion. So they rush inside, they shut the door, they take a moment to catch their breath, and when they turn around, the door is gone. And all sorts of shenanigans ensue, and all hell breaks loose as they try and figure out how to escape this house, which is constantly shifting. And that's kind of the basic elevator pitch and setup. Yeah.
Nice. So it is the classic. It is literally the haunted house. You kind of pinned it right on the nose, calling it The House.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I love it. And that's what Alien is, too. It's a haunted house picture in space. So
exactly.
Yeah. Why World War II? Why Battle of the Bulge?
So I personally thought there was a lot to mine out of that time period.
Yeah.
It's been done to death in film and TV, but it's something that's kind of missing from comics.
Yeah.
So I figured it presented a good opportunity to, one, isolate these soldiers away, because Battle of the Bulge, the lines were extremely thin and everybody was just they're undersupplied. Guys are left out sitting in freezing temperatures with nothing but t-shirts on for months at a time.
Yeah.
It was bad. And it kind of presents this perfect moment of psychological torment to then drop, what traditionally in action films would be the ideal hero into this kind of, really treacherous environment. And they don't have communications. World War II is really the last time the world has to function without immediate communication with each other all the time.
Right.
So that was really the purpose for setting it there.
Yeah. Well, that non-communicado kind of builds that tension. So that's
exactly.
Really, yeah. Yeah. Especially with everybody being so uber connected.
Oh yeah.
And I think from like a psychological underpinning, we were talking about this a couple of years back and Drew brought up this point and I thought it was fantastic. So I also have to make sure I attribute it to him, but World War II, especially from like the US campaign in front, right? We spent years kind of resisting getting into it, even though we were supplying the British and other people with stuff in a way that was, until essentially we were drug into it with Pearl Harbor and other events happening. So we obviously played a very big role in kind of, helping kind of close the theater. So, if you're looking at VE Day, we land in France, we push our way across, we have the Battle of the Bulge, all these things, we make it to Berlin, we win. And instead of like the congratulations or the rainbow at the end or the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, we come across the real atrocities of the Nazi regime, which are the camps and just the concept of like, we came in and we saved the day only to in the end find out it's so much worse than we could have possibly imagined. And perhaps our reticence to get into the war cost even more people their lives. So the idea of World War II, like psychologically, like, the triumphant thing only to find out it's even worse than possibly we could have imagined, worked really well in a horror scenario and kind of reinforces those concepts of, in horror, there's no like happy endings. There's no winning. There's always a cost paid, even if you're able to be successful. And I think the book itself works really well in those confines and settings of what the story we're trying to tell.
So let me get this straight, Phil. You're saying when you wrote, you kind of had a parallel of the atrocities that Americans might have seen after breaking through into Berlin. And so you're writing a parallel within the house of being able to see these atrocities firsthand.
Yeah, I think it just kind of lined up really well. And I have to attribute a lot of that to Drew coming up with like, let's set it here, let's do this. And, the house is a lot about these individual people and the demons they're battling on the inside. And that kind of externalizes really well with kind of what was happening in World War II. So, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So why Dark Horse? Why now? Because you guys did a Kickstarter. It funded 150% than what it should have, which is awesome. I shouldn't say why it should have, but I mean, because it was awesome, it did 150. You guys were in Comixology, I believe. But this is the first time on actual, nobody can buy the independent stuff anymore. I think you guys are gone and sold out on that. So
just about
that.
Yeah, just about.
There are a few
There's
copies
no possibility
left
for people to do that? Can people?
Yeah, we still have a couple copies from the Kickstarter print run. Yep.
Can I get one of those?
Yeah. I've got a box left in my basement still. So.
Dude, that would be awesome because I love horror books. We had Thomas Jane on, the guy who did Punisher back in 2004, 2005. Mm-hmm. And he's a huge horror comic nerd.
Yeah.
He had stuff on his walls. He was like taking his iPad and showing me all the stuff that he has. It's really cool. So, I mean, the horror, and the point is that the horror genre, man, it's, especially with comic books, there's something special about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think it's, part of me thinks, I feel like it's because of like what is
EC?
Because of EC and all the Comics Code Authority and all that. It's kind of become an urban myth of the type of books that were there and what we have today, you know? And it was like all psychological because I have like Eerie #4. It's the only book I have from the 19th.
Awesome.
Wow.
And it's in shitty shape. It was slab. I had to open the slab.
Okay.
Because I had to read it. I had to check it out. I'd never had one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I don't know. I love the horror, so I'm excited to see what you guys going on. So why Dark Horse? Why now?
Yeah, so when we were originally working on the book, we put together a pitch, and I want to say it was 2012, and we pitched it to a couple companies, had some interest, but it didn't quite work. A couple of years later, I rewrote everything. We reapproached the pitch. Again, we almost got approved by another company who will make. And at the time, Drew and I were just like, we're tired of waiting for permission to do the book that we want to do. So we just decided to do it. And I think in 2017 is when we started releasing it on Comixology. So we spent 7 years working on the book, about 3 or 4 years writing and 3 or 4 years drawing. And then it was, again, like we did it digitally and we did the Kickstarter and we printed it physically, and we've been hand selling at conventions and comic stores, kind of reaching out one at a time. And last year, Drew did a really good job reaching out to retailers when Diamond was shut down for the pandemic, and we sold more copies to retailers last year than we'd ever sold.
That's awesome. That's hustling right there.
Yeah, and we reached almost the bottom of our print run that we did. We did over 1,000 copies, and then when we hit that, I've worked a lot with Dark Horse and have some really great relationships over there. So I reached out to my editor that I've worked with for years, and I was like, "Hey, like, here's all the good things that people have said. Here's what we have accomplished on our own. Here's a copy of the book. Would you guys be interested?" And she was already a huge fan of the book and was like, "Yeah, I will send this in right now." And within a couple of weeks, we had approval from Dark Horse. And Dark Horse was one of the ones we pitched it to in 2012. So it's fun to come full circle.
Full circle.
Yeah. We willed the book into existence because we spent our money getting it colored and lettered and a lot of money. And, and we're here now. So
this is a great story because there's a lot of people out there right now that have independent books that are really working that market, that Kickstarter market. And here you guys are. So, it's not overnight. It's a grind. 7 years.
It is a grind.
Yeah. Drew, what have you taken away from this project? And are we going to get more of the house?
So the house is, very near and dear to me.
Yeah.
At its core, even though it's a horror book, horror is ultimately looking to exercise something. And for me personally, it exercises my own grief over things. There are a few tributes in the book, and the book has continued to take on meaning, I think, for both Phil and I. I had a friend who was a huge supporter of my work, and she unfortunately killed herself during production. And then, so the book was initially from my end dedicated to her. And then fast forward to, I think, about a year and a half ago now, Tom Lyle passed away, who was, a mentor to both of us. So for us, the book is just, it's something that we are immensely proud of. There was never any upfront money for it. We invested a lot of money, and we invested in ourselves in this project, and we did it because we both believe in it and we loved it and we had a good time making it. So for Dark Horse to take it on is a huge win on our front, and it just, we're excited that it's going to get into the hands of more and more people.
Yeah, I mean, getting into Dark Horse and having it get out to a bunch of LCSs and other markets that they have, like Barnes & Noble and all that kind of fun stuff, it just opens up your audience to such a wider selection that didn't even know. Like, I didn't even know the Kickstarter was out there at that point.
And that was the big thing, was that we can hustle as hard as we want. It never guaranteed anything. We were extremely fortunate during COVID, that Phil alluded to, that when Diamond shut down, we were able to reach out to all these shops and we're able to offer them deep discount on the book and tell them, we're not shut down. We can ship to you tomorrow. And just get it out to keep them moving as well.
That is hustling right there. That is real hustling. I've talked to other people where they just were dejected, I mean, I'm not getting anything. No. And it was just like, you got to hustle. This is the time to shine.
Me and Phil both have 10 years now in the industry, I think, somewhere around there. I mean, for me, Canto was kind of a last straw of, I don't know how long I can keep committing this amount of time into these projects, because they're time consuming.
Yeah.
But if you put the time in and you hustle, you can get there.
Yeah. So does that mean this is done after this, or is there any stretch of you going, or are you just avoiding the question, which is fine? Are we going to get this one, and maybe perhaps down the line you might have an idea for the house, or for right now we're resolved?
There's a spiritual successor that's on the horizon.
Nice.
With a third spiritual successor. I personally have an idea of how to do a direct sequel. Whether or not it would be quite as long as the initial series is a different question. We kind of used all of our tricks in the house, but it's definitely, you know, we've talked about it over the years. I think at some point it's something we'd like to sit down and really hammer out and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Take some time off Canto and do something a little bit more harrowing. I love Canto.
It can't all be happy little tin men and axes.
Exactly. So what else have you been working on besides the house? In your industry, you've got to have a bit of a back.
Yeah. I mean, so like kind of leading up and around the house, I did a lot of work with Dark Horse on their Tomb Raider franchise. I did a bunch of stuff for Top Cow. Right after the house kind of came out, I started work on a creator-owned series called Triage that I wrote and drew and penciled and inked and colored and did everything but letters on.
Wow.
That completed at the beginning of 2020, and the trade dropped during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then since then, I've done a bunch of stuff for Z2 that's slowly working its way out, just some graphic novel art. And I'm working on a big graphic novel for Dark Horse right now that hasn't been announced yet. And I'm doing like everything: colors, letters, writing, pencils, inks, the whole shebang. So that'll hopefully be out next year.
You're kind of so you're doing a lot of one-man shop. So what is it like having someone like Drew, that one is a fantastic artist, Drew Yar, you're a fantastic artist.
Thank you.
And then on top of that, has great ideas, because he was a driving force behind Canto, another great series that we just talked about.
Yeah.
Obviously a driving force on the house. But how easy does that make your life, having somebody to, pen ideas off of, and then not have to worry about all the lettering and the inking and the penciling and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, no, it's nice every now and then to work on a project where I'm not doing like every aspect of what it is. It's a little bit different sometimes when I work with other people, because I have to a degree, turn off parts of my brain that they're doing because they're in charge of it. That's where their skill set comes in.
Right.
And we're working together because of the quality of their work. But it takes a little bit of work when I'm like, I send them the script, and early on, especially, I wanted to draw it and be like, no,
right.
That's Drew's thing. He's going to do a great job with what it is. And and then, when I get the art back, and I think I learned a lot. Obviously, this project's a little bit older, even though we worked on it for a long time. And I think writing it back, kind of some of the first drafts, and then working through the process and looking at the artwork coming back and how Drew was changing stuff to make things work better. It taught me a lot as a writer about what you can and can't do, or how to do things in comics versus, I think the script itself is very cinematic. And even some of the early draft stuff we did, I look back at it now and be like, I'm glad we changed that, because it's literally impossible to do in comics. But I was just thinking of it so moving instead of static. So I think that entire experience taught me a lot about approaching writing in comics for the very specificities of the medium, as opposed to just like, I've got a cool idea, let's put it on a page. It's like, what works in comics? What can we see? What can we do? And Drew and I have laughed a lot about it over the years, where I'm like, I'm sorry I asked you to draw some of these things, because it's so damn hard to figure out how to do. But it was cool. It was a good learning curve, and a product that we are super, super proud of. So
how big is this book?
168
pages, I think.
Something like that. It's a big book. It was cool because initially, did we set it up as a graphic novel initially?
Yeah, my first outline that I sent you, because I dug it up when we were looking at special features and stuff, it was for a 120-page graphic novel is what was originally. And then we adjusted our model, and it ended up being a whole lot bigger. So
yeah, once we knew that we weren't going to have a publisher, that going the self-published route was going to be the way to do this with Comixology.
Yeah,
it was cool because page count went out the window. So it just became, how much time do you really want to invest into what we're doing? And the biggest area of that is probably the opening of the book, which I totally forgot about until I heard you talk about it the other day, Phil.
Yeah.
The initial opening was 2 pages long, I think. And I ended up expanding it out to 12 pages or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And it's one of my favorite parts of the book. It's probably like, I actually want to do more with those characters, even though there's not a whole lot for us to really mine out of them. But that was the fun part, knowing that was we weren't, we didn't have to commit into any sort of printing guidelines.
Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah. So the intro fun
is.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Cover is amazing, and it kind of gives like this really drop down look. Is this the main cover?
This is the cover for the
issue 1 cover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What were you thinking when you drew this, Drew? Was this you?
Yeah, this was me. So we had another cover for a long time that I adored, and that was colored by Matt Doring.
Yeah.
Who's gone on to do an endless amount of animation stuff. But that was the original cover. And then when the time came to redo it, I didn't necessarily want to lose all the elements from that initial cover. So we kind of split the difference on, what can kind of tell the entire story in one shot.
Yeah. Yeah. What was it like working with Comixology? Was it pretty much get what you need to get done and upload it, and Amazon was really cool about things, or was there any?
When we did it, it was really easy. It's literally just like the thing that you don't account for when you do these books is production of the actual book. Yeah. Putting all of the little details together, the title pages, formatting pages, all of that stuff is what you don't really account for. And certainly Phil, who did all that stuff, did a great job for the Kickstarter. But man, what Dark Horse went and did, like, you see the difference between bringing in somebody that does this for a living. Yeah. And it just was like, we were like, I can't believe this is our book.
Just look pretty. Did you get it? You're like, oh, it's so pretty.
they're sending us option after option. And I'm like, oh my God, is this what this is like?
You're like, go a little slower, just a little slower. Oh, that is awesome. I had to show a couple pages so people can get a good idea of what we're talking about.
Sure.
Because it looks amazing. When you do a page when it's all action, Phil, how much of this did you script out for Drew? Or did he just know what was happening?
For a lot of the book, I would script things out. I think, like, Drew doesn't mind. Like, he likes to know what's going on and to be able to figure out how he wants to approach it. So I felt the book was decently scripted. I'm not an impressive scripter, but at the same time, Drew didn't want, like, here's a sentence, draw 30 pages out of it. He wanted to know what's going on. And then from there, he would take it and adjust it however he needed. Again, expanding 2 to 12 pages or 3 to 6 pages or vice versa to kind of find the right beats. But I feel it was fairly scripted for the most part. Yeah.
When you look back at your guys' time working on this book I think you guys started in 2010. You got it on Kickstarter by 2018. Comixology, 2017?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What is your favorite time when you think of this whole thing? Was it because I think one of my favorite times is that initial stage where you're so excited and you're like idea after idea is just waterfalling off of you, or is it when you finally put pen to paper and you put that last dot over that last I and that cross and that last T, or something in between?
Yeah, no, the two things that stick out to me, and then Drew can talk about what sticks out the most, like favorite moment to him. When we had the book finally printed, Drew flew out to where I'm at. We live in separate states. Mm-hmm. And then we spent the weekend like packing up 200 boxes for Kickstarters. And then we got to do some store signings for I live in Utah, so there's some really great stores in Salt Lake. And we sold so many copies, 40 and 50 copies of the book at each store we went to. And that was to us, it was very surprising. And something about that moment of like physically having the book, getting it shipped out to people are the awesome ladies at the post office that we would just come in with stacks.
Those ladies hated us.
they were great. I loved it. They were like, meh, so I'm getting paid either way. Bring them in. And then getting to do signings and just kind of seeing it in real life, finally being able to give it to people. That was one. I think the other moment that sticks out to me, obviously for personal reasons, is we sent the first couple issues to Tom Lyle when we were getting him out to Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And he read them, and Tom is our comics dad. And he doesn't
notorious ball buster.
Yeah. He doesn't mince words. He's not going to give you a compliment that he doesn't feel is deserved. And he sent us really nice and really high praise for the effort.
Yeah.
And to the point where he's like, it was surprised me. I wasn't expecting it to be good or this good.
That's definitely dad.
Yep. And that was a moment that I think, the things that he said, we might have them printed in the book, this version. If not, it's in some of the marketing materials we have from back in the day, his praise. Yeah.
Has Dark Horse changed any covers, or are we getting the original covers that you guys went to press with?
New cover we did for
new
it.
Cover.
Yeah, entirely. And there's new special features, and like I said, the production on the book is similar in style, but it's very it's in a new version entirely. So
Dark Horse loaded in a ton more than I expected them to.
Yeah.
For behind the scenes stuff.
Have they been released yet? Any of the covers been released yet?
Yeah, the one cover, the what's going to be the trade cover.
Yeah, I think if you look up like the House Dark Horse Comics or something like that, you should be able to see the new cover that Drew and I did. And
let's bring it up for him because
totally. I think it's a great cover.
Oh yeah, that looks
there's like the skull behind the house. That one. Yeah,
it's coming off here. I'm gonna share it out.
Nice. I think, the cover process, both on Comixology and all the editions we've done, that was one of the few times I think we were more collaborative from an art side. Yeah. We would pass layouts back and forth and thumbnails back and forth and whatnot. So yep, there it is right there.
Oh, there it is.
Let's give it a proper zoom. Yeah, look at that. That is ridiculous. I love the trail. Who did the cover on this one?
Drew did the art and colored it. Yeah.
See, Drew, you got a style. Like I can tell Drew when I open up a book and see your in pages, but your cover stuff, dude, you seem to you switch it up. You don't go, that's a Drew Zucker right there on every single one. Like you can do that with certain artists, right? Like sometimes I have a hard time the difference between McFarlane and Larson because they're very similar in style, but yours I would never think to see this coming out of Drew.
That's the thing is every because I made my bones on Canto.
Yeah,
and this kind of to a lot of people this comes out of left field. Like Phil can attest to it. I am a horror nerd through and through, and it's probably the thing I'm most excited to come back to.
Yeah.
Once Canto's wrapped up, it's a little harder to have a mainstream hit with horror, but there may or may not be announcements coming in the near future about something that's lined up that's going to be around sooner than people think.
I love it. But dude, when you showed this to Dark Horse, what was their reaction? They're like, that's the cover. Boom, print it.
Oh yeah, no. So we did a lot of different layouts on this one, a lot of tinkering to get it to the spot. And I'm going to tweet it out here shortly. Maybe not today, but I colored 3 different versions of this cover to get the right one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's
very different colors.
Knowing that you guys work together on the cover, so it kind of feels more synergistic. Is that a word? That's not a word.
We work through
synergy.
So I do the initial thumbs, and then Phil kind of does a playthrough on the thumbs, and then if there needs to be another round, we just kind of work through those, and then eventually we got down to 3 that we were comfortable with 2 that we actually liked.
Yeah.
And we sent it off to our editor and was like, here, pick one.
It looks fantastic.
It
does, man. That skull is just freaky, and I love the blood trail coming up to the house.
It's so hard to look at this book now because all I want to do, and Phil has had to stop me because I was like, good, Dark Horse picked it up. I can redraw the entire book now, right? I can do it. I can do it better. I can make it scarier.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's for our next In Spirit Of. Which I'm hoping you'll come on my show and tell me about. Yeah, this is awesome, man. I'm super excited. I love good horror books. I think, and I feel like it's either there's not enough, like they try too hard to be psychological, or they just go for gore. You know what I mean?
I when I was in college, I had this big realization, and it's by no means original, but when you have it, it changes your entire perspective of the genre, which is that there's a difference between being scared and being disgusted.
Yeah.
If you want to be a 13-year-old and obnoxious about it, you can be Eli Roth and make Hostel.
Right.
Or you can be an adult and actually show some skill and make Alien or The Thing.
Right. The Thing is so classic, man.
I mean, you can, there is room for both of these things, but there is a distinctive difference between them.
Yeah.
And in comics in particular, the best part about comics is there's no budget, there's no getting everyone together. It's just me. I could do this in theory on my own.
Right.
But, it's me and Phil.
Right.
The hard part about that is you lose every other element that comes with film. There's no sound, there's no movement, there's no jump scare, there's no pacing. So what we had to really figure out for this book was, how do I then essentially use what is the overused scare in a movie, so a jump scare, but how do I bring it into a comic? So that's where the shots become really important, page layout, pacing, spot blacking. And it becomes really difficult to do that. And I think to make a horror comic is something that a ton of people try to do. And it's questionable how many actually succeed at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you, when you're drawing and you're staging everything out, are you trying to think of it more of from a director point of view, or are you thinking it from a story? I mean, obviously you're going to think from a storytelling point of view because you're telling a story, but are you thinking of what would this look like on film and then trying to incorporate that still shot with the action shot, like you're talking jump scares? Or is it just really just, I just want, I mean, we always just want to make the best product, but I'm just trying to figure out what your thought process is when you're coming up with that kind of stuff.
The way I see things in my head is very cinematically. I understand camera movement, and that's how I kind of see everything, and I see it in an edit, essentially. Translating that into the page becomes, okay, I know, so if Phil gives me a script that's got 5 panels in it, and I read them and I go, okay, we have 5 panels, but, so let's say it's like a walk down the hallway and something, they're walking and they turn around and they think something's behind them. There's nothing there and they keep walking.
Yeah.
And that's 5 panels. There may be areas where it's like, where does it make sense to put an inset to indicate a specific action so that we can stay close? Maybe it makes more sense for it to be a wide shot and it's only insets that move around the page to help, guide the eye and give a sense of tension with that main shot. So there's a lot of, how do I not only serve the story, but how do I serve the shot-to-shot beat?
That's awesome. When you guys are working on this, Phil, you're writing out the script. I got to kind of ask you a weird personal question. How many inner demons came out when writing something like this, especially on something that because 7 years on one project, especially on a singular story, like if you work like on Batman, you're working on an arc of 6 issues and then you're moving on to something else. I don't think there's anything personal being left there unless you have some weird, very attachment to Batman. But something like this that is super personal, super in there, something always comes out. And I'm curious, did you have any of those types of things come out?
That's a really good question. And yeah, like I was writing the script from 2010 to 2014. So anywhere from 11 to 7 years ago. I think on a personal level, I had my grandfather's older brother died during the Battle of the Bulge. So there was always that personal connection in I had a family member who was in the middle of this and never came home. I think the remains that they were sent was like, this might be his remains. We really don't know. He stepped on the land. So there was that element. And I think, it was funny. So I was writing the book initially from a very like kind of specific point of view of like, this is the problem that these people are facing, and this is how it relates to their psychology. And I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to like spoil some of the stuff. But after like a year or two, it clicked. I was like, oh, I'm writing something that's actually very different. And I turned to Drew. I was like, Drew, this is what this book's about. And he's like, yeah, I know. Like, that's what it's always been about for me. And it just kind of, it was a fun
story of our relationship.
Yeah. I envisioned it one way, and the more I wrote it and wrote through these characters and what they were thinking and what they were feeling, the more it kind of, the more I understood it differently, and it kind of like naturally my emotions kind of progressed and changed to a spot where Drew was like, yeah, that's where I was. And I don't know if we just never talked about it at the beginning or what it was, but yeah, there's little bits here and there for sure. And I think it was just that the more I dug in, the more I kind of pushed into their hearts and cores and kind of what it is that they're struggling with and whatnot.
That's interesting. Is there a character that you relate with more than the others?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I mean, our main character, Harker, I think there was a lot I identified with him because starting out, he's very much like a passive character who doesn't want to be there. And through circumstance, kind of ends up finding himself having to constantly push himself out of a comfort zone to help the people around him. He's kind of our reluctant hero to a degree, and how he kind of comes to terms with that. And I think, that was one that I felt that I could identify with, in that, like, he's not the all-star of the group. He's not he's not the superstar. He's not the superhero.
Right. He's
the one who's there because of circumstances out of his control, and would just rather not. And I think that's an identifiable characteristic in all of us, when we would love to be the best, but we're also aware that we're not. And sometimes in situations, we just try to get through them. And it's not that, like, are you going to step up, and are you going to take control, and are you going to help the people around us? And I think all of us want to think we're that person, and hopefully we are. Right. But, just like Harker, you never quite know until you're in that situation. So
you don't know until you get hit in the mouth.
Yep.
Then you know. Yep. Drew, is there a character for you that you identify with more than the others?
Not identify with, but my favorite character in the book is probably Markley, mostly because he is the angriest, and he probably has. He was the most fun to draw. He has some great scenes in the book, and it's a lot of. There's a lot of stuff where I think when I was doing the story stuff with him, I just felt myself hitting my stride with the book.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, when you're here now, we're coming into October. We're going to get this book. What is something that people can, not a spoiler, but maybe something should be looking out as, this scene here is something that was really special to us, or we went this far into it, and or maybe there's one that you're like, because you already said I could redraw this whole thing, I can make it better, but there's got to be one that you're like, that turned out the way we envisioned it from the beginning.
I would say that it's not something that, it's not necessarily a scene. It's something, so people who read the Comixology version but didn't get the Kickstarter version are missing a very particular short story called The Tale of the Diary of Ethan Wilde. And it's going to be reprinted in the Dark Horse version. So if you got it on Comixology, there's some story incentives to get the Dark Horse version. Anything involving Ethan Wilde in that book, I thought was a total stroke of genius. And it was a story element that came in super late into production. But Phil sent it to me. I read it, and I asked him, so who did you steal this from? Because this is awesome. I thought that this was because they're diary entries that make appearances. Yeah. He makes an appearance once or twice. I thought that this was a real diary entry.
Were you bringing in your inner Bram Stoker?
It ties in back to something that Drew mentioned earlier. The opening sequence was 2 pages long. Yeah. And then Drew was like, can I get some more space? I think I can do this so much better. And I was like, go for it. So then he turned in 12 pages of art without any script to it. So I sat down with that art, and I was like, how do I script this And it just came to me that like essentially it's there's like a voiceover happening that are entries from this diary, and the whole time you're trying to connect, is it these two characters we're seeing? And at the very end, there's like a little editor's footnote of like where these entries came from, where the diary was found, what year, just like a little like, again, it's not real, but at the same time, it felt kind of that fun meta way. And then when we got to, again, we finished the Comixology version, and we wanted to add something more for the Kickstarter version. So we added an epilogue, which tells the tale of this Ethan Wilde that we found the journal of in like essentially the prologue. And up to this point, everything in the book is colored by Jen Hickman, and they're an amazing. They've gone on essentially just to be full art duties. Books like Lonely Receiver with Zach Thompson and a bunch of other books. So that was, I think, the last book that Jen ever colored as a colorist solely. But when we got to Ethan Wilde, I ended up coloring that whole thing. So I did a couple of the covers, including the Dark Horse one and that short story. And it's my favorite thing in the book. It was just, It was really kind of surreal horror. It ties into the story, but in a way like just really fun little extra. And then, I guess people could essentially skip to the end of the book to read it, but it's a fun epilogue that goes with everything.
When he sent me the lettered prologue, I read it, and I drew the damn thing. I know exactly what happens. I was uncomfortable reading it. I was like, this is creeping me out.
Have you always had a darker side, Phil, when you're writing?
I don't know particularly if I have like a darker side. I'm a huge horror fan, have been since I was a kid. Started reading Stephen King and things like that way too early. And I love horror, and I love the way it's a controlled anxiety release. I guess you could, like, I've always had a lot of anxiety, and horror is a way to like safely bring that into your system and to process it, and then to feel fine because you're in control. And that's one of the things with anxiety is you feel like you're out of control. And I think that's one of the cathartic aspects of horror. And so I've always loved it. It's Drew and I are both giant horror nerds, and we can talk forever about like our favorite stuff. But I think it's more so just kind of channeling that inner self and being able to bring emotions to the surface and process them and let them go is the most important thing as a human you can do. And it's not a skill anyone ever teaches you until you're like going to therapy and doing other things like that. But horror is that way of doing that without realizing it.
Drew, you obviously have a darker side as well. That's there, and it might be by attrition, just like Phil was talking about now. But for you, is it more in your art, even though writing is art? But I mean, is it more in your art or in the writing, or is it a subjugation of both?
I'd say it's probably subjugation of both. I was the biggest pussy growing. I was such a baby. Blair Witch scared the living piss out of me.
Yeah.
And ironically, the xenomorph was like the thing I couldn't handle. And you fast forward to when I'm 14 and I actually discovered Alien, and it's like my favorite thing in the world.
And when Nightmare on Elm Street came out, I couldn't sleep for 3 days.
Right. So it's weird that, when I was younger, I was so terrified of everything. Yeah. And then, you grow up and then you kind of see what's what, and you start finding your way. And to me, horror is just like, it's one of the best genres and one of the most underappreciated genres. Because for me, I can tell whatever story I need to tell using horror elements, whether that's just me drawing, whether that's having Phil on as the writer, whether that's my own short story writing. It's a genre that lets you play in it very easily. And it's fun to make people, get out of their comfort zones for a little bit and be uncomfortable. My life is spent being uncomfortable all the time. You spend 6.5 years as an EMT. I've literally been covered up to my elbows in stuff that belongs inside of people.
Wow.
You just that trans, and that's me though. I can function in that environment.
Yeah.
But transferring some of that into people's day-to-day lives that don't experience that level of like 1 to 1,000, that's something that I personally think is kind of fun.
There you go. Well, guys, we're almost an hour in already. Isn't that weird? It went so
funny how that happens.
I really am super excited. Thanks for coming on. I cannot wait to get my hands on this book and read it. I love horror books, so this is going to be a treat, especially these ones. And Drew, I can't believe you never told me about this book as many times as we talked.
It's so, this book is so weird because it got so caught up in all the Canto stuff.
Yeah.
So when Canto was really kind of on its roll, there was nothing else there. And some people discovered this book on their own just by virtue of finding Canto and then looking into me.
Yeah.
But now that Dark Horse is, given this book like new life, it's exciting that we get to now come out and use all of the resources that Canto's afforded me over the last few years to really bring this thing to the masses.
Dude, this book is perfect fit for Dark Horse.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I know Canto's over IDW, and I love IDW. They do some great stuff, but this doesn't fit their route.
Oh yeah.
But
no,
Dark Horse, man,
Dark Horse.
Yeah. This
is nuts and bolts.
Yeah. Are you guys going to be at any Comic-Cons?
I'm not going to be at any in 2021. I'm going to start looking at my 2022 schedule when they start announcing dates, though.
I was approved for my New York City badge as we went live. So
nice. Today?
I will be at today.
Nice.
Literally right before we started recording. I will be at New York. I won't have a table. I will be floating. I know IDW isn't going, but I have to reach out, see if Dark Horse is going or who has a table and where I can float around to. And I will possibly be at Baltimore. We're working that out now.
That's awesome. I'm going to try to go to Emerald City.
Oh, nice.
Oh, nice.
Seattle. So
I love that show. I just wish it wasn't right before Christmas this year. So
I know it's such a weird time. There's a part of me is like, why don't you guys just do it your normal
in the spring?
The same reason that they're doing it during Thanksgiving.
They just want to hurry up and get their money.
I mean, it's fair, right? We understand, but
we're gonna try. We're gonna try to get a table for the podcast. We'll see.
Oh, cool.
Very cool. Kind of feel like we have enough people that come on to go over the stuff, so we should be able to.
2021 is going to be weird. 2022 though, that's going to be a crazy year for people. I am really excited for San Diego next year. It's going to be a big year.
Yeah, we're going to try to go to San Diego next year.
Thanks.
We're going to hit up our LCSs because we used to have one comic book store that would give us their tickets because they never went.
Oh, cool.
So we'd go and we'd go to the retailer event and the Skybound event.
Awesome.
Kirkman and have dinner and drinks with them with all the other, which is weird because there's like 3,000 comic book shops out there right now or 2,200 or something like that. And there was like 15 of them in this event. But they all get invited, so it's kind of weird. You would think they'd all go to get behind with the people at Image, They're like, hey. So, but it's funny, you guys are talking about Lyle, who, and I was sorry to hear that he passed, but we have the same thing here. We have Andrew Sumner. He's over at Titan.
Okay.
Titan Publishing out of the UK. He's the same thing. He comes on our show all the time. He's become more like a father mentor figure for us. Kind of just exact same, he doesn't pull any punches. What we did right, what we did wrong, and he's been in media for 30 some odd years. So he's you got to have that sort, man. It makes a big difference.
There were a lot of people that did not like Tom and at school in particular, but Tom was known for burning a few bridges here and there over his career. I always told people at school, you can't get mad at him because he always tells you the truth. You may not like what he has to say, but the guy, you go back and read his Spider-Man stuff, and everyone talks about McFarlane and Bagley.
Right.
I dare anyone to challenge me on that. Tom is probably the third artist that influenced more of 90s Spider-Man behind those two. It is incredible how much of that 90s show is actually, it looks a lot like Tom Lyle art.
Yeah, that's cool.
There's a lot of Tom DNA in there. So, I mean, having that person that will push you and not always sugarcoat it for you is not a bad thing.
No. If he's telling you, it's probably because you need to hear it.
I spent the weekend with some of our artist friends who were SCAD people. And we spent a long time talking about, like, I don't know if I know anyone who ever cared as much as Tom did. And he was very passionate and he would argue and fight with anyone, but it wasn't just because he liked to fight. It was because no one cared about comics and teaching and helping people learn and grow and get better more than Tom ever, has. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think you can have a higher compliment than that.
No. Listen, it was, we were what, 9 years out, 8 years out for me by the time when he passed away. And it's still every year at New York. That was what I looked forward to at that show the most, was getting to go hang out with him for, the hour I could get him away from the table.
Yeah, we had dinner plans. He went into a coma a week before New York Comic Con in 2018, and then passed away a couple of weeks afterwards. And I was like, I had a message on my phone from him. We had plans for dinner, and it was just a sudden thing. And it was a tremendous loss for everyone in the industry entirely. But he's got a generation of comic book artists who he's influenced and taught. So he'll live on that way.
That's the best thing you can do, is just remember and say the words you're saying now. I mean, because I want to go back now and see. I don't think I realized that he did a Spider-Man run.
Yep.
So now I want to go back and check out his Spider-Man run just to see it.
He designed the Scarlet Spider costume.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep.
That's his big claim to fame in Marvel.
The spoiler costume at DC and Scarlet Spider and Marvel. So.
Yep.
All right, guys. The House. October. Dark Horse. Get to LCS. Tell them that you need that in the store. If you're on previews and they have the pull box thing that they do, which personally I don't like. I want to just call my dude at the LCS and tell him, but he's using that pull box from previews.
Sure.
But if you're doing that, make sure that you look up the House and add that to your box. Drew, Phil, thank you guys so much for coming on, man. This was a real treat. Hopefully we can get you guys back on again soon. Maybe when it comes out, we can do more. Drew knows I love talking comics, and we had him on with David Boer a couple times going over Canto. And we actually went over one book, like page for page.
Director's commentary.
That's right. It was a lot of fun. I don't think we could do that with the House because of the sheer size of it, but we could take a small snippet of it and do something like that.
We could do a highlight.
Definitely.
So.
Yeah, something that doesn't have too many spoilers for people. I'm excited. I cannot fucking wait to read this.
Oh, man.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for having us on. It's our favorite book to talk about together. I know Drew maybe likes Canto more, but when it comes to the House,
I don't know. This one got the personal little deer in here to his heart, so it might be a very neck and neck there.
They're all my spoiled, dirty little children.
They're all his little pretties. All right, guys. Well, we'll talk soon.
Hey, sounds good.
Spaghetti. And we're back.
That's right. We are back. Back in the saddle again. Well, I hope you guys really, really enjoyed that as much as we did making it for you. And if you like what you heard and you want to hear more, you got to go check out spoilerverse.com, because at spoilerverse.com, we have a plethora amazing directors and artists of all walks of life, and editors and writers. And oh my God, are you a lover of comic books like we are? Then there's so many amazing people from the comic book world over at spoilerverse.com. And I highly implore you to go there and check it out.
Yeah, and while you're there, you can check out all the other podcasts on our network, like Bridges and Geekdoms and Funny Book Forensics and Haphazard Adventures and Nerds from the Crypt and so many more.
Misery
We put out
Point Radio.
episodes all the time. Go check all of them out. And check out all of the reviews and previews and articles we have going up every single day for you. Every day on spoilerverse.com for you to check out and to read and to love and to like and to comment. We have a store link. If you want to help support the site, you can do it two ways. One, go to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/spoilercountry, or go to our store link in the middle of the site there and get a t-shirt, a face mask, a hoodie, something, look fly as hell, and help support the site when you do that, because we get $1 or $2. And, maybe you want to talk to us. If you do, you can do it obviously on all the socials, but if you go to scpod.us/discord, you can join our public Discord server and come